mostly elderly men and women. And secondly, it was a protest that lasted 8 straight days, with the participants determined to continue until they got what they wanted. Another extremely rare characteristic of Ghanaian protests. Often in Ghana, it's a day, you go, you march, you get to a particular convergence point, they address them, people disperse, and it's over, right? But this was different. They went to one particular location every single day, holding up placards, and they were determined, we won't leave until you give us what we're asking for. Now, this protest by our fathers and grandmothers had staying power. It was persistent with a clearly defined singular demand that never wavered. So in the era of, you've had a lot of the names, Fix the Country, Economic Fighters League, Arise Ghana, by the way. They attempted also to occupy Parliament at a point, Bernard Mona and his group, to stay there until they got results. They didn't have the same staying power, right? In the era of these groups, all led by the youth, what can the younger generation of activists learn from this older generation, if at all?
It has ended. In Ghana, our beloved country is free forever. You see, we shouldn't have taken our elderly through this process. But of course, it shows that this country, there will always be people who will stand up for some of these things. And the young ones, I'm encouraging you that when it gets your time, look at what is happening. Say, no, this one is not right. I will fight for it. And if we get many of you also doing that, the nation will be a successful nation.
That, by the way, is Dr. Eduan Aniunchi. He is the convener of the Individual Pensioners Bondholders Forum. And this was just yesterday when the finance minister, before Parliament, announced that he has granted them explicit exemption. He didn't only say that on the floor, he followed up with a letter with clear terms written and signed. That's all they've been asking for a long time, and it was a significant battle between themselves and the finance ministry. And just after the finance minister's announcement, he gave that interview and already began to hint and encouraging the young ones. You heard him say that. I'm encouraging the young ones to fight. He says this is an example of how you can do it. I'm paraphrasing that, but in essence, that's what he was saying there. Saying the young ones, if this is an example of how you can do it, you can achieve stuff, and don't give up. In a sense, he was saying there. But that's a very important point, and that's we are picking up from that advice, because he led them. I mean, as I said, this is pretty rare to get a protest to convince government, well, to force government to give away everything else they didn't want to give before. The finance minister tried, kicked, screamed, just to avoid writing in a letter to them that I've exempted you. Instead of doing that, he moved from 0% coupon to 15%, brought it down from 15 years in terms of maturity to 5 years. They still said, no way, we aren't taking it. And the thing about this that interests me is the deal that the pensioners got was far better than the other individual bondholders who were below 59 years. They got 10% coupon and 5% maturity tenure, right? And even for that, the individual bondholders who were below 59 years, they said, okay, we are fine. We will exercise our right to self-exempt. We are cool. We will not protest anymore. We're fine, right? But even with 15%, these group of protesters say they were determined to continue. And many thought, but you're being too much. You're being unrealistic, unreasonable. And the finance minister kept arguing with them, saying, but more than 80% of you have maturity in terms of the span of your bonds. Most of them, your bonds mature after the 4th year. So I've actually done you a favor by bringing your maturities to 5 years, so you can pick your money away and leave quickly. And they still said, no way. As for that, leave it to us. Finance started telling them, well, look, you can't trade it if there was an emergency, because tradability will be an issue. They said, well, no way, we don't care. Leave it. We made a decision to go. Just give us exemption. And an interesting thing, the day before the exemption was granted, the finance minister was meeting with them, and he said, listen, I have done everything. Now tell me what I haven't done. He said, I don't understand why you're still here. And was questioning why they're still protesting. Because The finance minister again was forced in the letter before then, in the last paragraph, the first time he's done so, to explicitly mention the pensioners and say, I will pay you when your coupons are due. He mentioned them by name. I'll pay you in line with government fiscal commitment. Mention the pensioners by name, and said, "I will pay you." They still said, "No way, we don't want that. What we want is for you to tell me you've exempted." And guess what? They got exactly that. After all the back and forth, the fight, the screaming, the kicking by the finance minister, they dragged him kicking and screaming to signing that letter to give them that permission. Well, what is it that the younger generation can learn from that? Maybe this is an exaggeration, but I have connectors who know how to tackle this subject. Most of them are activists themselves, and it's an interesting conversation because we're going to be connecting the older generation to the younger ones so they can have a conversation on this very subject. And I'm delighted to say that Dr. Edouard Nanyentwi himself is connecting with us on Zoom. Hello, Doc.
Yeah, hi. How are you?
Doc, I'm doing fantastic, and thank you very much for connecting. And I've been talking to you for so long now. You seem like you are my father. I mean, since this fight started, almost every day I speak to you. I'm delighted that you've joined us tonight. We are not talking about the pain of whether your money is going to be paid or honored or exemption or not. We're talking about something bigger. And you said it yourself. You started that conversation yesterday when you spoke to the press, talking about the young people and what they could do to get development and progress for Ghana. So stay with me. I'm invited a few young ones to join the conversation. Many of them activists themselves in their own right. Hadi Yakubu is the coordinator of the African Rising, a Pan-African movement mobilizing people and organizations across the continent and diaspora to achieve unity, peace, justice, and dignity. And Hadi, by the way, congratulations on your new role. Have you left the Economic Fighters League yet, Hadi? Hello, Hadi.
Hi, Evans, greetings, and it's been a while. Thank you very much. There's no leaving the Economic Fighters League. I have stepped down as Fighter General, and there'll be there'll be a transition process. Namata is acting now, but I'm still very much a fighter.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, so the man is ascending. Great to have you, Hadi. Thanks for staying and agreeing to connect. Peter Kilsing is a youth activist, a former student leader. Kilsing, always a delight to have you. Oh, guess who else is connecting? Abdul Karim Ibrahim. He's a researcher, journalist, and a graduate student. He has the activist blood in him. And I remember sitting down with this gentleman, Abdul Karim, and was talking about activism. He asked me, "Why are you not an activist?" I'm not. I don't have it in me. I see myself more as a factivist. I just follow the facts. I am not an activist. They say, you have to. So I'm delighted to have him, and he accepts that I don't have it in me, but I would follow and help those like him who go. I mean, we can all be activists, can't we? Some will have to, support those from the front line. Karim, you won't disagree with that, will you?
I know I won't.
Okay, great to have you, Abdul. And guess who else is connecting with us tonight? I love hearing her passion for activism, and she was a lone female voice, I dare say, among the Fix the Country movement and conveners. Felicity Nelson is with the Fix the Country campaign and connects with us. Hello, Felicity.
Hi, good evening. How are you?
I am doing fine. Always a delight to hear you, Felicity. I'm so happy that you could join us on this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Indeed.
Dr.
Nanyentwi, let me start with you. So, Doc, when you said yesterday to the journalists after the announcement that you've gotten everything you wanted, and you signaled to the youth that you can also do this and you can also bring progress, help me understand what you were saying there.
Well, we have to agitate for all this while before we got what we wanted. And my advice was that the youth should learn from these elderly people that it is not the violent nature of protest that can give you what you want. And so when you needed something and you hit the street, damaging vehicles, anything that's your way, you want to make it. Setting
Some people's cars are placed, burning tires, sometimes blocking the whole highway, confronting the police, and in the process, sometimes shots are fired and people lose their lives. And I was saying that you can do peaceful protest and still achieve what you want to achieve. Otherwise, if it's only through
Hello, Doc. Hello, Doc. Oh goodness me! We may have lost him. Hello, Doc. Okay. Let's see if we can get him back on the line right now. What's the challenge? Okay. Let's reconnect. Establish contact. But he started off by making a point. Hello, Doc. I'm beginning to hear you now. Can you hear me?
Oh, I went off.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yes.
Fantastic. I lost you briefly.
I can hear you.
Yes, please make a point.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I was pointing out that the destructive nature of demonstration that they use are always involved, damaging properties. Even when you are at school, the school property that you are using, the school bus that takes you, you burn it down. Confront the police, you burn people. Sometimes people even passes by, people who don't know what you are doing.
Well, we're having a challenge with that, with his connection.
Yeah, vehicles through the show of might that you can get what you want to get. You can achieve this. These people didn't have any strength at all, but they were able to do what they have done and gotten the results that they want. Sometimes even the approach let you not get what you want. People rather end up in the police cells after they have done all this violence. Then your aim you wanted to achieve is rather true purpose, and now it becomes fighting.
I mean, Doc, I'm going to call you on the better line, but I think I got a first gist of what you believed, contributed to the success, and I'm pretty sure there are more elements and nuances in that. I'll get more from you on this, but at least he set the tone for this conversation. Felicity, what do you say to Dr. Duananentwi?
Well, I find it very interesting that, his first, you want to give advice that, copy, young people copy us. And his first instinct is don't be violent. And within that is like a perception and a false perception that young people, when they go for protests, tend to be violent. That isn't the case. And also there's a lack of acknowledgement about the fact that it's very difficult, like there's very few avenues for young people to be able to address, like for their concerns to be addressed. When you think about the fact that for example, when we wanted to go and picket on the e-levy at Parliament, we had an agreement, we'd spoken to the police, and they agreed we'd be allowed in the chamber. We get to the gate of Parliament, there's like a ridiculous police presence, very antagonistic, very, just they look so angry, so aggressive, and, and we'd agreed on these terms, and we'd spoken to the police prior to that, we'd gotten permission and everything. We get that day has been changed. If you notice where was the police presence when the pensioners were doing the picketing outside of the finance ministry? Do you think that how many young people would be allowed to even dream of picketing at the finance ministry? And let me give you another example. When we're going to court on the case, when the police had sought an injunction against us regarding the fact that we couldn't go on a protest, when we're going to court and we had a court hearing, one of the days we got outside of the court, the police refused to let, I was a party to the case, they refused to let us into the court. There was like about 50 policemen outside the gates. One of them even ended up assaulting me. So, we have to, if we're going to be having these conversations, let's have them in a very holistic, let's put in the right context, let's look at the nuances, the differences between how the state treats young people, because remember that culturally we are ageist. We don't respect young people. We have this whole thing of the adult is always right. So as older people picketing and protesting, they must acknowledge their privilege, because we live in a society that respects older people very much. We give them a lot of grace. So when the way they'll be treated and the way we are treated is not the same. And if you're in a privileged position and you're being treated better, don't look at us and say copy us without looking at how you are privileged. And I really want to touch on, because there's always this sense of every time young people want to go and protest, you find out there's this heavy, there's the army, there's, all of these things, the police, heavy artillery out, they've got sometimes tear gas. Look at what they did to the law students. Right, so there's a perception that young people are violent. So before we even leave our homes to go out there and protest on whatever issue, they're ready to meet us with force. So it is actually the state which is violent. It is the state which is the aggressor, not the young people who want to go and protest or picket for their rights. So I think I want to start the conversation on that note.
Okay, and I think you touched on the point there about the ageism, but also the privilege. Do I hear you say put the success of their protest down largely to the fact that they are elderly?
Yeah, I definitely think there was an element of that, but I'm not going to discount privilege by itself. They had the privilege of being older, but they were very consistent, right? They didn't just do a one-day thing, and I think that for example is actually admirable and something that we as young people need to learn to do. Because they were there for what, 9 days?
There were eight straight days. Yes.
Pardon?
8 days, 8 straight days.
Yeah, 8 days. So the consistency, because a lot of the time sometimes we don't do the follow through. So I think in terms of even the consistency also contributed, but also even having someone like Sophia Ekufu, who was part of this regime, who has stepped out, who's no more the Chief Justice, coming and lending her voice. Because if we're going to be honest, they were picketing, but even the media wasn't paying a lot of attention to the issue. But the minute Sophia got involved and she went to sit there with them, because of who she is, the position that, again, privilege again, right? How we're prioritizing and amplifying the voices of people like her over the other voices. Suddenly, it was like the main issue in the media. And the last few days, that's literally been like the trending topic. What is Sophia saying? So all of these things, you cannot discount the impact that played in terms of them being able to achieve their aims.
Interesting first thoughts, and I've noted them down. And Dr. Duan Anentwi is listening. He would take them one by one and then address them. But I want to hear from you, Hadi. You've been doing this for a while. You wear your red berets as a sign of protest and defiance. What's your comment on this?
Yeah, Evans, thank you. I was hoping that you would allow Felicity or Karim to speak before me, because I really felt that they could actually...
Oh, sorry, Karim, I'm losing you. If you can speak up a bit, Hadi.
Yeah, hello, Evans. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear now. Go.
Yes, I was saying that. Thank you, and I was actually hoping that you would allow Felicity or Karim to speak before me.
Oh, Felicity just spoke. So
either of them
it's you.
Either of them would be able to articulate the response to what Dr. Anani has said better than me. But yeah, Felicity has done that pretty well. But I think there is another false assumption that we also need to confront. It is not true that young people's protest or confrontation with the system has not achieved anything. And once I make this point, I'll make two other points and then I'll rest my case. Everybody here will remember what happened with Drop That Chamber, right? Young people rose up and raised their voices across the country, first on social media, and then threats of demonstration, and then the escalation. I was then fighting.
I mean, one of your members was arrested, correct? If I'm not mistaken, somebody was arrested. Yeah.
And Leslie was arrested, but there was an escalation when we went to Parliament. to do the protest in the house, when they wouldn't listen to anybody from outside protesting from outside the house. And the chamber was dropped. That was a momentous achievement for young people. $200 million was saved for this country. And I want to just juxtapose that with what you've just described as success for the pensioners. I think you see where I'm going with this. This was a confrontation against the system in favor of the whole country, because the argument was what? What was the argument about? Well, the argument was we need 200 million to build schools so that children can learn better. We need 200 million to build hospitals so that children can learn better. As opposed to let us stay and we're not going until we get exempted. This is more personal, right? So I want you to recognize that sort of distinction. And let's take it a bit further. And I would even be bold to say that it speaks of a generational characteristic. And I'm not afraid to say that. I think that this current generation, those are the pensioners, the Akufo-Addos, these people who have been the beneficiaries, the largest beneficiaries of what Providence can provide to this our country. They are by far the most selfish generation, and I'm not afraid to say this. I will say it again anyway, because if you look at the kind of damage that generation has done to this country, I think that there needs to be an acknowledgement of some sort of they have, and if in any case, if young people who are focused on changing the system, on making sure that the system is reformed or the system is overhauled to benefit everybody in Ghana rather than just themselves as their persons, we're getting support from the elderly who are now purporting to teach us how to protest. I think we wouldn't even have got to a point where the finance minister has the arrogance to touch pensioners first, because he would be afraid of what young people would do if he were to touch their grandfathers and their fathers' pensions. But because the older generation are want to satisfy themselves in what they can get for themselves, look at all what is happening with our roads. Whenever a road is bad, they buy a V8. When there is no water flowing, they get a polytap. Or a borehole. When electricity, it's always about what can I do to escape the systemic rot and the systemic injustice that is, rather than what we are always protesting against, which is confronting the systems of oppression and making sure that the systems of oppression are dismantled, not only for us, but for everybody in the country and for everybody who is yet to come into the generation. And those of them who are honest enough will acknowledge this, and they will acknowledge that what happened, good and well as it was, would not have happened if they had contributed to the long struggle of young people to ensure that this false republic that has been foisted on us, that does not serve our purpose, that has imposed a constitution that is completely bogus and fraudulent, if they had supported us all this while to get rid of that constitution and make sure that the country is reformed to benefit everybody rather than just the few at the top, there would not be room for a finance minister or a president to be so arrogant as to touch pensioners' funds.
And Hadi, stay with me. You raised so many very fundamental issues, and Felicity as well. Abdul Karim and Kilsing. Just a second. I want to bring back in Dr. Edouard Nanyangchi. Doc, so you've had a young activist raise a few concerns that make it harder for them to achieve results. What do you say to Hadi and Felicity, for example?
Well, you see, sometimes even controlling, they are not able to control themselves. That's one key thing. Even if you have asked young people, they themselves, with their leaders, have decided that this is the route many a times people will go against their own rules that they have set for themselves. That is a factor. The patience is not there as the elderly will exercise that patience. You recall what happened when these young guys wanted to come and assist.
Yes, and for those who don't know, let me just give the context to that. So it was the day before the finance minister went to parliament. It was on a Wednesday. And some of the young protesters joined you, Bakavomawo and others. And I recall watching this on television when the finance minister was meeting you in the open and then had asked the question of one of your colleague pensioners to try and interact with him. And then I think I had at the back, I think Vomawo or somebody tried to, take over and ask the question in the way. And I had you or somebody quickly shouting that you're not one of us. And it sort of caused a bit of a commotion, and finally had to retreat into his office. That's what you're referring to.
Yes. I came out to say, you came to help us. Do what we are doing. If you came to help me to sweep, when you come, you help me to sweep. You don't come and do any other job than helping me to sweep. So that's one thing that the young ones should learn. Insulting, I have told people, and I was in some radio programs or TV programs with young people fighting the same cause. And I told them, your mood of fighting is not right. They will tell you, you're a regulator, so you do your everything diplomatically. As for it, we have to do this, we have to shout, we have to insult. You see? Then I say, is that what will give you the result? They say, yes. If you don't insult, if you don't do this, they don't see it. That is a worry that I see, that it is not the insulting, the exhibiting that behavior is what will give you what you want. Just assist that, look, I'm doing a peaceful demonstration. I'll continue to make it peaceful. Sometimes they put a place that a barrier that here you cannot. This is security zone, so stay here. I believe if they stay there and they are peaceful staying there, they could still get their results. But you see, they will say, don't go beyond it because of their usefulness and they have the strength sometimes. They want to show that they also have the strength. You see them pushing these things against the police to beat them away. That is what results in this confrontation, and sometimes they will spray you with some.
Doc, those are some of the issues. Yes. Yeah, what about Hadi's point that the younger generation are taking on issues that are very national in nature, affects everybody else in this country? He mentions the Drop That Chamber protest, which was in essence stopping Parliament from spending more than $200 million of the taxpayers' money to build another chamber of Parliament where they could have used that to improve education, for example. And it makes the point that your protest was a protest that was demanding interventions that will only benefit a small group, extremely small group of people in comparison with the rest. And that possibly was why it was easier for you to get it. But also, it also shows a certain disconnect between what the youth is taking on and what the older generation have done. And many believe that in this case, for example, the older generation would now have been this vociferous and vocal and persistent in the protest if it didn't touch them personally. Well, what do you say to Hadi?
Yes, everybody understands that you can fight for the whole nation. Even 10 people can do something, act in a certain manner that can affect the whole nation. So I don't think it should be related to whether it is a class of the society or is it the whole population. So you would say if it's the wider population, then it demands some stronger show of force. If it's for a smaller society, then you don't have to show that. And I believe, as you all know, even smaller groups, even at their schools, on campuses, that's not for the whole Ghana, they still are not able to do the things in a more peaceful manner. The word is, we don't say don't do it, but how the thing generates. Everybody may be going there thinking that this is going to be peaceful, but you have some few people who will decide to do things that will result in the whole thing becoming an unwieldy situation. For example, when we were meeting, some few people thought that, look, from where we are, the street there, especially people who can walk, why don't we take our placard and move, on the street? I said, no, that is not what we say we are coming to do here. We say we are coming to converge here. Convergence, if we are converging by staying at one place, you are not moving around. These are things that if the young ones are involved and say, no, don't do that, let's remain here, they may not understand you. Then they will do that, and the 60 people say, well, you have reached the rules, because you are supposed to be just around here. Look at where some of the people are going. That is a challenge for the young generation, the younger ones, when they are involved in some of these things. You may have a good idea about this. We won't do this, but by the time you get there, before you realize somebody has started something, and that's through the whole thing overboard. And everybody will be blaming that they have gone to be violent. But it might be that just one person who decided to breach your own rules that you have set for yourself. We are going through this breach. The police know you are going through this. Before you realize, some of them have bribed to other areas.
So that's a very important point for you. I'll come to you shortly to address the subject of the ageism there, the fact that you were elderly. And Felicity says possibly privileged because of your previous status when you were active. That possibly aided the success of your protest. But Karim, let me hear you. And then Kilsing as well. Karim.
Evans. So why am I hearing so much about a certain distinction between the problems that so-called young people suffer and experience, as opposed to, for instance, what the elderly people may be experiencing? When I listen to Dr. Anani, I get an impression, and that's the impression that one gets all across, almost everywhere in our own experiences, that at some point people get to this level where they sit back and then watch. And I remember the other day you and MFAPO were dealing with a proverb in Tree that says that openi die mante mante. And for all of those things, I wonder really if this pensioners problem was truly and exclusively a pensioners problem. If you listen to the argument that they were making almost all the time, you would get the impression that nobody wants to be a burden upon their family. And when they talk about their family, in this case, who are they referring to, for instance? Chances are younger versions of themselves in the family, among many other things like that. And then again, the bit about privilege that I think is very important that those who led this particular campaign would listen to is that, of course, by the nature of this conversation, it puts what they have done against what other people are doing. For that matter, we would have to, as it were, deconstruct some of the things that happen in there. And Evans, to be very honest, there's nothing intrinsically or exclusively or inherent to what the pensioners did that caused them to get the success that they got. Because what happened? The best of it all would be that they picketed continuously for 7 days or 8 days. But apart from that, what was the number, for instance, of people who were there? And then again, the way that positions also the government or the other alternative in many instances on the other side is problematic, because it assumes that today, because pensioners, and to be very honest, I want to believe that it is for the lack of strength and all of those things that come with youthfulness, that is why their approach, for instance, took the way that it did. And many of them, as we have come to know, when they were young like us, they did not confront problems in a very mild, laid-back position. And for me, it is all of those things and the moral significance that we place on the idea of the elderly is what has gotten them where they have gotten to. And so let the impression not be created. And again, here it is not that somebody is fighting them, but let the impression not be created that the way out is how they have done it. And that if everybody did that, when law students, for instance, marched peacefully on the protest of Accra because they just wanted to have further rights to access education, what did Madam Sophia Kufu's Judicial Council or board or however we call it do about that? When she, for instance, had an opportunity to speak on a matter of this particular nature, what did she say? She almost ridiculed everybody and played kind of a play with it to say that the legal profession is the no-go profession. All of those things mean something. And so maybe the elderly may not appreciate the intersectionality of the problems that we are talking about here. And that in this instance, because it specifically attracted them, and then again appealed to the general Ghanaian moral, superficial, vague orientation, where because it is the elderly, there's a certain aversion that we have, that it is a sight that we cannot see. But that never went into interrogating, for instance, and I mentioned this on your show the other time. It didn't interrogate, for instance, what this also means for a 30-year-old disabled teacher who put his money somewhere and has no other person to rely on. I am not sure, and I don't mean to take on Dr. Ananienchi, but because he is on the show here, I am not sure, for instance, that his case may exactly be worse than this teacher in the scenario that I'm creating. Okay, so for me, it is good what we have gotten from there, but let us not exaggerate its place within the context of protest culture in Ghana and use it as a model experience that we must all buy. And if we don't, then maybe the occasional sprinkling of, as it has been shown, the occasional sprinkling of water and tear gas and all of those things may not happen if we all go around and put our hands behind our back. The people we are dealing with have been shown that is how they go about their things, Evans.
And Karim, you said something that triggered something that Madame Sophia Kufu said subsequently to her protest to my colleague Raymond Aqua about the relationship between her generation and our generation. And Raymond Aqua is joining me right now because I want him to restate that point, because I had to say that to him in that exclusive interview. Raymond, what is it that Madame Sophia Kufu admitted to when she compared her generation in terms of what they've done or haven't done and this current generation?
So, Evans, she was categorical that from reviewing her time in the country and the very thing she has done and being 24 years at the Supreme Court, she's convinced that the older generation, her generation, has failed the younger generation. In fact, it's one of the reasons she believes that the time she has on her hands now, she will do everything possible to try and pursue causes that would suggest to the generality of this country that there's a problem we ought to fix. And she said categorically that after this protest, I will take on other courses and make sure that I prove or get the people to understand that they are not alone in this fight and that we need to do more for Ghana and send a better signal to the younger generation that we can create a better Ghana for them.
I find that very, very interesting. And Kilsing, what do you say to that? I mean, this is Madame Sophia Kufu. She goes out there. We've not seen her as a protester before, but she does. And then she tells Raymond in that exclusive interview, you can watch it, it's on our many social media platforms, that admitting that her generation had failed our generation and that it's the reason why she's sort of making up for that by now stepping in and fighting. What does that say about this conversation we're having, Kilsey?
Yes, genuinely, I do agree with the scores of opinion that is being shared, on this panel. I also do agree to an extent of what Madam Sefer Kufu mentioned, that her generation hasn't done enough to live up to standard and fight for the cause that we are all pursuing. But this is one thing that we must also understand on the age factor of the entire conversation. We have this moral significance of respecting the aged and always prioritizing their interests. And so we say that in our local parlance that, to wait, there is practically no way the elderly can be wrong in innocent. And so even if they exhausted the most uncomfortable way of protesting or confronting the problem that was in front of them, definitely the finance minister was going to badge and give them the audience they deserve. We have always had this consciousness of not, considering whatever the young have to say, even if they are right or wrong. It is for that reason why the young have been very radical in our approach. And one thing we must also consider is that the kind of energy levels of the young compared to the old are completely different. And so if you went to a protest field and the young were pretty radical or aggressive, that would be much more understandable than the aged who would relatively behave less aggressive or less radical. And so for me, about this whole argument that has been put before us, it's something that we have to look at. The older generation to me have done their bit. If you look at the fight towards our democracy, the post-independence era to date, it's them who have been lifting the banners of our flag high, protesting, let the blood flow, this and that, carrying cocoa from the farmlands onto the mainland for transport or export and etc. They have done their part, and of course, their part is not enough. But that is what we must understand. What I am hoping for is that the current youth who are protesting or who are aggressive about some of the negative nuances of our democracy would not get up there and do completely different from what we generally expect. The fact of the matter is that we have a lot of youth who have got into the top echelons of politics. Some have been named ministers. Currently in our political space, we are encouraging more youth in top ministerial jobs or top state jobs. If you look at the current government today, and lot more of them are relatively younger and are holding responsible capacities. But what has been their output? And so, Madam Sophia Kufu is admitting that her generation has not done enough. But the fact of the matter is, how prepared is our generation to take up the mantle of leadership when the time is up? We take a look at student politics and the conduct of young leaders in that sphere, and it's absolutely terrible. You look at the ones already who are holding positions in their various parties and their dignity and honesty levels, and there's nothing to speak about. It is rightly unspeakable. And so, would it continue to be a mere expression of rhetoric? Every day we talk about the fact that we are not given the opportunity, the elderly have failed us, it is time for us to take the mantle, and etc. How prepared are we? That is the question. They are defending their interests because it is something that has really come hard against them. The fact of the matter is that we very soon would have the mantle to make a statement, to make a case. And the most apt opportunity to actually make a statement is when we are given a responsibility and they have to perform. And the entire, eyes of the world is on you. There is a deep expectation for you to live up to a certain duty and do not perform. That becomes catastrophic. And so it should not remain just about Madame Super Kufo saying that she is disappointed and etc. She thinks that now the only slice on her, it is incumbent on her to do better, at least to salvage the lost glory of their generation and help ours. But the most important thing for us is to understand that if today Madame Felicity Nelson or Hadi Yakub or Abdul Karim or any of us is given a position, would we repeat what the elderly have done, or we will live differently up to the task and glorify our generations to come?
Yeah, and that's a fundamental question, I guess. There's a lot of food for thought here on the back of this conversation that this has triggered. And I want to come back to Dr. Donald Entry, just as a wrapping up, and before I come back to all of you to wrap up with, is there anything, though, we're learning from all of this, in spite of the different nuanced positions we've taken? Dr. Donald Entry, so I come back to you with a question. Would you concede that the success of your protest, a primary reason why, an important reason why you had the outcome that you had, was because of the reverence that as a society we give to the elderly, and that was a main issue in your success? Would you concede that?
Well, you see, one thing that people want you to know, I've always been telling the young ones that sometimes we are rushing as if the world is going to end tomorrow. The speed at which we want to get things done, rush, that's another factor. Sometimes it may not take you just one day of demonstration to achieve something, but maybe continuous. You think if we have done it 2 days, some people were still talking that, look, we are tired, we must find a way of ending this. But we say, no, we have to continue until we get what we want. It cannot be given to us just one day. That is another factor with our young ones. They want results as quickly as possible. And so if something that they wouldn't be able to take time for a longer period to get a solution, but they want to get it as soon as possible. And if you do that, sometimes you go to first day and then before you realize. But if you are consistent, peacefully, but consistently, you are doing it peacefully. The emphasis is the troublemakers that you see in this demonstration. Not everybody goes there with that aim of going to. You can see we are going to have a peaceful demonstration. But before you realize, somebody from day one, that is not for peace. That is not his matter or her matter. It's not for peace. If you ask them to converge at one place and stay there without moving, it is the controlling. You can't control them. Somebody will move and go and do something that will jeopardize the whole peaceful atmosphere that they want to achieve. So that is a challenge that must be addressed, and it's a difficult thing, especially when you can't determine what anybody wants to do. But if generally every one of them says that, look, for us, we won't go to this extent. We will keep within this space. I believe they can still get what they want.
Well, the results. Dr. Edouard Anenchu, thank you very much. And by the way, Doc has told us that he is not stopping the activism culture that he and his colleague pensioners have started. He's transforming the group into a domestic creditor committee that will begin to still advocate on the behalf of those who lend to the country locally. I want to come back to my connectors on the other line about, now that we're wrapping up. Felicity, there's something Alan Entry just said there about the staying power, that young activists tend to want to do this in a day and they don't follow up and they think it's okay, but what they did was to go there. Yes, they were sitting, but they did it consistently until they were determined. If you don't give me, I'm not stopping protesting. Is that something possibly that we could take out of this as young people?
Well, first of all, the fact that Fix the Country has been going for 2 years. We've held about five protests already. So when you tell me about consistency and showing up, someone that's been doing it for 2 years and someone that's done it for 7 days. So already, let me just show that is not something we need to learn. We already have that. We are consistent. We are doing that. But I do want to also add that we need to. He wasn't even on this conversation today. You have, even on this conversation, you've given him more time to speak than any of us. Even at play is ageism. You've let him speak more than all of us. You've given him more airtime than all of us. It's all. So even in this very little conversation, the privilege we're talking about is here. It's literally happening. But however, he's not gonna be willing to acknowledge his privilege, and that's okay, because privilege is blinding. So I can understand that. But my point is, moving forward as a nation, we need to understand we shouldn't just fight for things which affect us personally. Because even when you think about these individual bondholders, why are they doing these things in silos? They should have done all of this as a collective. Every time, okay, nurses, then we'll go on a little strike. Policemen, doctors. We're constantly doing things in silos, as opposed to recognizing that these issues are systemic and we need to fight them as a collective. We need to collaborate and work together to find a way to solve the systemic issues. This one thing has not solved our problems. It's not solved our financial. It's solved a few people's problems, but what happens to the individual bondholders? What happens to the economy itself? It's crashing. So the thing I just want to leave us with is just recognizing that we all have a part to play, and just moving beyond things that affect us, and not just always waiting to move into action only when things affect us.
Karim?
Personally.
Well, Evans, for me, I think that the conversation is very important. We need to situate it within a proper context. And this is not a debate against the elderly generation, but let us not exaggerate the significance of what they have done over this past few weeks or days that has benefited from our collective support as a model for us to use. The independent struggle leaders didn't use the approach that Dr. Anani Antwi did. If they did, we probably still will be under a colonial oppression.
Hadi, are you on? Yes.
Evans. Yeah, thank you. So I think maybe, yes, we accept the advice that Dr. Anani has given, but there are a couple of pieces of advice that we also have for him, and that we would like him to also give to his colleagues and generation. First is that those of them who were young during the independence era, they attended education for free. They got healthcare for free. They got almost everything that Providence could afford our nation to give them. When they took over, what have they done? They've saddled us with a country that in 100 years will still have so much debt to pay that those of us who are young now and have no kids, our great-great-grandchildren will still be in debt. What have they done? They have destroyed completely the foundation that the independence generation created. What have they done? They have completely handed over our economy to international monopoly capital, our gold, our oil, our bauxite. Almost everything that we hold dear as resources that Providence has provided has been handed over to international monopoly capital. So here is an advice. Can he, Dr. Anani, was giving us advice on how to protest, also advise his generation in power to manage the economy well, so that pensioners would not have to go and stay at the finance ministry for 7 days in order to be exempted from a dubious debt exchange program.